Sponsian really existed.
They're definitely not manufactured in Rome, where there was a very, very high artistic standard. But we got them under the microscope and then some analytical equipment and did a whole battery of scientific tests. And we basically showed two things. First, they're covered in scratches of exactly the type that coins that have been in circulation for an extended period of time have. And then there's dirt, and the dirt is cemented in place by silica, which is a substance that binds soils together. There's actually 200 pages of scientific reports under this, but they show these coins have been buried underground.
He says there is no evidence to suggest Sponsian ever ruled from Rome itself, but was an emperor nonetheless, governing in a Roman outpost just as the empire itself started falling apart. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
To recap our top stories, Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure in Ukrainian cities. French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour to enshrine abortion rights in the French constitution, and columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her 27 years ago. That's the latest feature story news. Chris Jones reporting.
But first, our parenting expert, Rebecca McCallum, is here with some advice.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Rebecca. Now, Rebecca runs a popular parenting blog called Mom Magic.
That's right. It's about the everyday parenting choices that could make a big difference on our children.
Rebecca, I read the blog a lot. My first question is, who the hell do you think you are telling me how to raise my kids?
I have a degree in early childhood education, but my greatest education has been raising 3 beautiful kids of my own.
Okay, Rebecca, what other bullshit do you have the nerve to share with us this morning?
I talk about this in my book, and it does take a lot of effort, but parents really should teach their child a second language. My daughter Hazel and I are learning French together.
Wow, I'll bet a lot of moms watching right now are thinking, you.
Well, I get that a lot, but the window during which language acquisition skills are at their peak is really very small.
I wish I had done that. You win, but guess what I just remembered? You're not my boss.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live. It's Free Talk Live. Welcome to the show, the program here. You can join us, bring up anything you want. And you can do that on our phone number, which is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. That's what we do here on Free Talk Live. And by the way, we are here live throughout the holidays. Doesn't matter what the day is, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, etc., New Year's. We're here, and we are live with open phones where you can take control of the airwaves, as we like to say. Joining you tonight, it's Ian.
And Chris.
And nobody.
And indeed, welcome, gentlemen. We got all kinds of stuff in the news to talk about tonight, including the latest on the Twitter changes that have been making headlines. Elon Musk expected to grant amnesty to all suspended accounts over the weekend, except those who apparently engaged in some sort of criminal activity or something like that. So I still suspect he's not going to let Alex Jones back, but we can talk about that. The number is, again, 603-283-6160. But more importantly, in San Francisco, you knew this was coming as soon as you found out that the police were acquiring robots. First, it was drones. And, of course, they have the bomb robots, right, where they can kind of remote control this thing in, and it goes and checks packages, mysterious packages. It could be bombs, that kind of thing. Of course, we know that they're probably working on humanoid robots. We've seen the tests from, I think it's Boston Dynamics is the company that's got those crazy...
Got the dog, doesn't it?
They've got the dogs, yeah. Thanks for the reminder on that one. Hawaii, I believe, was making headlines during COVID because they had the dog robot going around with a loudspeaker on it, blasting orders at people to, go back inside or whatever. But you knew it was only a matter of time before somebody strapped a gun to one of these things, and that's coming. That time is coming. They are already asking now, according to metro.co.uk, for approval, stating that the robots in San Francisco, the police robots, would be able to be used, quote, as a deadly force option when risk of loss of life to members of the public or officers is imminent and outweighs any other force option. So this is the very beginning of what will likely be a trend of the police getting. I mean, they haven't been granted the authorization yet, but they are asking for it. And of course, why won't they get it, right? Like, oh, well, we have to keep our officers safe.
I don't know if anybody else remembers, but I think it was the 80s, they were dropping bombs on people's roofs, like actual bombs.
Yeah, you're talking about the MOVE project, I think it was in Philadelphia.
The Push Move Coalition, they were called.
Yeah, they dropped a bomb out of a helicopter, didn't they?
Yep.
In that case?
Mm-hmm.
Went bang and killed people.
Including children.
Yep. That's right. Yeah, well, it's just over a neighborhood.
I have a retraction that I have to make.
Okay.
Apparently, I do believe that I saw images of the Twitter building with a ticker tape on it. However, I saw yesterday, I happened to run across images of words being projected on the Twitter building, which I said last week didn't happen, and I was wrong.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I knew somebody on the show had said it was an actual ticker tape electronic billboard or whatever, and yeah, it was definitely a projector. I have also since seen the images of that. So somebody from Twitter was mad, and they took their projector out into the streets and they projected insulting things about Elon Musk on the side of the building.
Mad call I it, for what is it to divine true madness, but to be simply mad? But let that go, for I shall use no art.
Hopefully they moved on and went and applied at the the coffee shop across the street or something like that, and they got themselves a new job.
Well, I think coders are still in demand, although I would not find Twitter on somebody's resume to be a good reason to hire them. I would expect. I mean, unless they were one of the 5 guys who actually did the work.
Well, yeah, I was going to say. I mean, they may have fired some of their coders, but I suspect the good coders were kept on board. If they're actually, like you said, working. A lot of the people at Twitter were just moderators, right? Like they were just people whose job it was to press delete on somebody who said something offensive or whatever. So who knows who was operating that. So anyway, back to the story, because by the way, Twitter's headquarters are in San Francisco, as I understand it, and that's where this story is coming from here tonight. The members of the city's Board of Supervisors Rules Committee have been reviewing the new policy for several weeks. The original version didn't mention robots until the head of the city's Board of Supervisors initially added that, quote, robots shall not be used as a use of force against any person. So this just goes to show how legislative things can be completely flipped. The intention of the person who had originally written this was to prohibit the use of force by robots.
Ooh. My first question is, if a robot pulls a George Floyd, who goes to jail? Anybody?
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point.
I mean, the police are immune. You'd think they'd already be immune.
Well, they're not immune to going to jail for just randomly murdering people. It's hard to do that because that has already been ruled by the Supreme Court as a violation of constitutional rights. And before you me, the guy who killed George Floyd's in jail right now.
He did go to jail, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, prison. It's not so much I'm going to say that's like that there wasn't such a ruling. I'm just a little skeptical that how often other than that one, can you name any other instance where an officer has gone to jail for murdering somebody?
It is extremely difficult to enforce law against any cop because we have been propagandized since childhood to believe that they're telling the truth and everybody else is lying.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a de jure problem or a de facto problem, not a de jure problem. De facto meaning according to the facts and de jure meaning according to the law.
Yeah, it is definitely true that it is hard to get any kind of justice against the police who commit violence against people. I mean, it's over 1,000 police murders every single year or something like that? Just police killing innocent people?
Yeah,
1,000 police killings. It's unclear how many of those are murders. Because some people do actually threaten the lives of police officers, and like anyone else, they have the right to defend their own life. We had a killing in Keene, for example, where a guy was literally holding a knife to a woman's throat. Anybody, including a police officer, would have a right to use deadly force against that person.
I feel like that's a rare circumstance, and most of the time it's the police going after somebody, whether or not they've actually done anything, wrong, at least morally speaking.
I don't know how rare it is, but I can say that I'm sure that the number of times that it happens is non-zero.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, but I suspect it's probably close to zero.
But I think the point you were trying to make was about these robots, and that is to say, if there's video, because if you want to have a chance of holding a police officer accountable for taking someone's life or harming someone or whatever, you better have video, or it's just not even gonna.
For sure,
you have no chance.
Yeah.
So if you get video of a police robot dog shooting somebody to death. Well, okay, you got the video proof.
Well, now who's behind it now, right?
Destroy the robot. It's not going to deter the next robot because robots don't care, if they are destroyed.
Yeah, that's
until we have true AI. Then that changes, maybe.
Where a robot could actually have feelings or something like that. You mean?
Exactly, exactly. For example, the rumored or allegedly sentient Google robot or Google AI, which is supposed claimed to fear death, whereas your toaster does not fear death.
Right? Yeah, they shoved that Google robot. It was called Lambda, LAMDA, and they really shoved that thing back under the carpet. They fired the guy that had revealed the allegations about Lambda being sentient, revealed the really fascinating, I think it was like a really lengthy interaction that he'd had with Lambda, presuming it was true and hadn't been edited. It was pretty amazing. And they blew him out the door and haven't heard much about Lambda ever since, sadly. The number here is 603-283-6160. So they're talking about getting authorization now to have police robots possibly kill people in San Francisco. And I guarantee you it's not going to end here. If and when San Francisco approves this, it's going to move on, and it may be in a city near you next.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Gold and silver. You can own the most stable assets in recorded history with BullionMax.com. Buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals shipped fully insured directly to your home. Free Talk Live can get you their silver starter kit at employee pricing. Just go to BullionMax.com/FTL. It includes 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products plus a free gold bag. This offer is limited to 1 per household, so get yours now. Go to BullionMax.com/FTL. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. from there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live. The phones are open. You can join the show here. Bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Police robots. Maybe you've seen them being used. They're starting to become more common. Thankfully, I have not seen any of the police dogs, the dog robots. Those things are really creepy. They're pretty, shockingly stable. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos of these things. You can't even, kick them over, for instance. They're very, very well balanced and scary and creepy. They had them in Hawaii with speakers yelling at people during COVID. Luckily, at least around here in New Hampshire, I don't think they have them yet. Hopefully they never will. This might be a good bill for New Hampshire state representatives who are anti-police militarization and anti-police state to put in something to prohibit the police from getting anything further than drones. They have the drones. So it's probably going to be hard to get rid of them from having drones, but you may be able to stop them from any further robotization, mechanization. So that's what we're talking about here. Phones are open at 603-283-6160. And also want to make sure that you know about Bitcoin.com. Because if you're interested in learning about cryptocurrency, because you got to understand, it's not going away just because some crypto exchange happened to be a big crypto exchange. This whole FTX thing, just because a crypto exchange has gone under, is not going to be the end of Bitcoin. It's not going to be the end of cryptocurrency. In fact, maybe it'll dip for a little while, but likely, I suspect it will come back to, ultra record highs again. Of course, we can't know for sure what's going to happen. Go to Bitcoin.com.
20% increase in Bitcoin Cash a few days ago.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah. I heard a rumor about some of the altcoins having a good day, so that must have been what was happening. Anyway, learn the basics before you get into it. Go to Bitcoin.com, click Get Started at the top of the page, and at the very minimum, watch the first 3-minute-long video. If you want to dig deeper, you can do that. It's certainly a very deep topic if you want it to be. Or just get the surface-level basics, and then at least you'll know some of those before you get into it. Just click Get Started at the top of the page at Bitcoin.com. They also have a great news site, updated daily with fresh stories and information from across the planet at news.bitcoin.com. Let's go to the phones here. Major Payne is on the line in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
Yeah, you were talking about all the coders getting canned and whatnot, and it got me to thinking, of course, there's always been scrambled letter codes in words and whatnot, and, invisible ink, the old lemon juice trick.
Oh, yeah.
But the only code I can think of that was never broken historically was the Navajos.
In World War II?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wouldn't be the first coders, but I would say they would certainly be the most infamous.
Yep.
Although, interestingly enough, that wasn't something that was developed as a code. It was just their language.
Oh, really?
Which nobody spoke.
But the code crackers figured this out. How, what can we throw at the Germans that they won't be able to crack?
Mm-hmm.
And there was evidently, a couple of Indians working in the headquarters there, and they threw them at the dog, and the dog couldn't find the bone. It was a good thing.
Not the same kind of code that we're talking about. We're talking about programming, which is a language of its own. But
nobody knew. It wasn't based on Latin or any other thing. It was discernible to them.
Yeah, I gotcha. Anything else, Major?
Well, you're talking about this devil dog here. And, by God, speaking of World War II, the Marines that died on Iwo Jima are rolling over in their grave if they name this damn thing the devil dog. But,
I don't think they're going to call it that.
No, well, they should. If they put a gun on it, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it is.
But the other question I had for you was that the USA and Wales played one of them international soccer games today, and they tied to a double goose egg. And I'm curious how often this happens, especially in like international competition for the cup and such.
I have no idea. I'm not a soccer fan, so but I understand. Isn't soccer one of those sports, kind of like hockey, where there's not a lot of scoring, or am I completely wrong on that? I honestly have no clue.
There's not a lot, but in hockey, at least, they do go into overtimes, and I don't know what the deal is with football. I mean,
I presume they're going to have to play again, right? Like you can't, if you're going to have a world championship cup, then there presumably has to be a winner. They can't come out of that thing with a tie, can they?
Hey, I got a good one for you. Little county.
All right, last thing. Go ahead.
All right, 619 votes for two different candidates running for the city council.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them got the same amount, 619 votes.
Oh, wow.
They put their names into a hat or a cup or something and drew it, and the two girls hugged, and that was that. But one vote can matter.
It really can, especially in a smaller town like that. Thank you for the call, Major. I appreciate it. And we see that stuff here in New Hampshire. They've had some recounts going on in the last couple weeks or so since the election. They were still going on earlier this week. One of the ladies who came out to my hearing this week, she had gone from, or the previous day, had spent all day. I just can't imagine spending even an hour watching people count votes. But some of these, some of these elections are won by 3, 4, 5 votes, and there have been some where it's just been 1 vote. So if you are interested in doing things for the liberty movement here in New Hampshire, voting, as ineffective as it seems, can actually make a difference on a local level.
I'm always amazed at people who say voting doesn't make any difference. I mean, I can kind of understand that elsewhere, but
it doesn't in New Hampshire, everywhere else. Yeah,
I mean, the numbers keep going up for Free Staters getting elected, and
yes, thank goodness.
It's not even like we dominate in terms of like raw numbers of the state, and
no, not even close.
So yeah, I mean, I would agree. Generally speaking, that's probably true, but I don't know. In New Hampshire, it seems like it's having an impact.
I think the best measure is probably NHLA
that's the New Hampshire Liberty
candidates. And my understanding is that a total of 98 such people were elected statewide in this last set of elections.
Yes, that's what I've heard as well. Or I think I heard 97, but either way, it's a new record high for New Hampshire Liberty Alliance endorsed candidates. And for listeners that don't know, the NHLA is really a unique kind of organization that looks at as many as they can. There's like 800 to 1,000 bills, but they look at as many of the bills as they can every year. They rate those bills based on whether or not they are pro-liberty or anti-liberty. And then they make voting recommendations to all of the New Hampshire House and Senate members. They print out sheets, these voting recommendation sheets called the Gold Standard, every single week. They're there at the entrances to the area where the state reps go in, the House chamber, I guess they call it. They're there handing them out every single week. I mean, it's a lot of physical work to go and get this done, but they do it. And then they grade the state reps at the end of the year, basically, and they say, well, did this person vote correct on this issue, and they go down the list, and they come up with a rating, A through F, and then there's constitutional threat that is even worse than F. And they give a grade to all of the state reps. And, of course, the top-rated state rep typically gets an award. This year, it should have been Matt Santonastasso who got the award, but he even though he was 100% perfect, it was another guy that got it for another reason. And the other thing they do is they actually endorse candidates. So when it's time for people to run for office, they send out questionnaires to all of the potential candidates, and they come back with their answers, and they pick the people that they think are the most pro-liberty. And this year, more of those people won than any year in the past. So it's been a really, really good year for electing pro-liberty legislators, even though the legislation or the legislature is split pretty evenly. More coming up. The Free State Project has reached its goal of 20,000 liberty lovers who've pledged to move to New Hampshire and get active to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Perhaps you're trying to figure out what part of New Hampshire should be your destination. If so, consider Keene. You'll find more than 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com. Keene is famous for its historic, publicity-generating activism, as well as being the liberty media capital of the world. It's home to freekeene.com, New Hampshire's destination for liberty activism, news, and opinion. For years, we've been compiling over 150 reasons to move to Keene at move.freekeene.com, where you'll learn about some of what's happening here and what makes Keene a great place to live. If you love liberty, you'll probably enjoy anywhere you end up in the Shire. But do your due diligence first. Please visit move.freekeene.com for the full list of over 150 reasons to move to Keene. That's move.freekeene.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Chris Jones. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. It's just the third time he's made a public appearance directly related to Russia's war in Ukraine, having previously visited a hospital for troops and a training ground for conscripts. Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Over food and drink, the president told just over a dozen mothers that he wanted them to know he personally, and the whole leadership of the country, shares their pain, that he understood nothing can replace the loss of a son, and that he wanted to listen to them firsthand to hear their assessments. Neither their replies nor the president's answers were broadcast, but questions have been repeatedly put to the Ministry of Defense and the president by women's organizations within Russia about the activities and fates of their children, as well as the freedom to talk about problems with the mobilization and recruitment process, for which criticism can currently result in prosecution.
The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure destroyed in Russian attacks. During a trip to Kyiv, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer what he called the UK's unwavering support. Sally Patterson has more.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's visit follows a heavy week of Russian strikes, which damaged Ukraine's electricity infrastructure and left millions without heat, power or water. The minister said the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and that he has seen firsthand how Britain's efforts are helping brave citizens to resist and rebuild. Included in the latest support package is funding to help the war-torn nation rebuild schools and shelters, as well as prepare for the winter. The funding will be targeted to areas recently liberated from Russian control in southern Ukraine, such as the port city of Kherson. Almost £3.5 million of funding, Mr. Cleverly says, will also be set aside for the survivors of sexual violence allegedly carried out by the Russian military.
Elsewhere in Europe, French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour of enshrining abortion rights in the French constitution. The legislation will now go to the French upper house, which also needs to vote for the changes in order for the constitution to be modified. And finally, columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her in a department store 27 years ago. William Denzelo reports from New York.
This new law gives victims of sexual assault a one-year period to sue their alleged abusers, even if the statute of limitations has expired. E. Jean Carroll is suing Donald Trump for defamation and battery. The former president has repeatedly denied the allegations. He says the claims are a hoax, a lie, and that she was not his type. William Denzelo, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Talk Live. The phones are open here, and you can join us and bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And if you've worked or lived at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988, and you've suffered from cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, you're entitled to compensation. Or at least you should be. Now, there might be some filing deadlines involved here, and you don't want to hold back. Don't wait on this. You can just call this number I'm going to give you, and you'll find out if you or a loved one are eligible. By the way, there were contaminants in the drinking water at Camp Lejeune from those years, so that could be the reason why people got really sick. Call this number, 888-918-1037. That's 888-918-1037. If you are at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and you've had a serious health issue, money is already set aside. It's 888-918-1037. All right, so we continue here. We've been talking about the police in San Francisco are now asking for authority, so-called, to kill people with robots. And the sad part of this is it didn't come up until somebody on the Board of Supervisors, which I presume is like their city council or something like that out there, until let's see, Aaron Peskin, the dean of the city's Board of Supervisors, added something to their rules committee notes or something like that, asking that robots shall not be used as a use of force against any person. So he wanted to enshrine that into the city code or the ordinances or whatever document they were amending. But then the San Francisco Police Department amended his addition. So they saw his request to prohibit robots from being used as a use of force, and they replaced it with a line that would then give robots the authority to kill suspects if the life of the public or the police was at risk. According to Mission Local, Peskin eventually decided to accept the change because, quote, there could be scenarios where deployment of lethal force was the only option. So the very same guy who wanted to prohibit them from using not just lethal force, but any force, now he's saying, oh, yeah, it's fine. So they persuaded this guy. I'm not sure how they persuaded him, but they persuaded him to come on board with the use of deadly force.
Well, I don't know how they persuaded him, but Epstein didn't kill himself.
Exactly. The equipment policy states that so this is the equipment policy, that the SFPD currently has 17 remotely piloted robots, of which 12 are functioning. In addition to granting robots the ability to use deadly force, the proposal also authorizes them for use in training simulations, criminal apprehensions, critical incidents, exigent circumstances, executing a warrant, or during suspicious device assessments. So it sounds like pretty much any time.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
What they mean by that, I feel like, is anytime an officer goes up to anybody or is in any kind of situation, investigatory situation.
That's what it sounds like. Anything.
Which is, 100% of the time. So.
And all they have to do is say that they're worried, right? Because remember when the police got their Bearcats, if you guys recall, the Bearcat, of course, listeners may not be aware, is an armored personnel carrier. And it is this sort of militarization of the police, yet another step in that direction. This is a decade old now at this point. Keene, New Hampshire, the little town where we live, population of 23,000, has a Bearcat. It was actually used.
And probably the only time.
Yeah, it was used against nobody. They attached a battering ram to the front of it and busted in your front door last year during the Crypto 6 raids.
I hate it when that happens. It was actually the side window, though.
Oh,
they ripped the window right out of the house.
They did the door later. So.
Did they do the door later?
Yeah, they did the door later as well. According to the video, at least that I saw, I think you were out at that point or something. I'm not sure what the timetable was.
They definitely did the window.
My first awareness was, oh my God, somebody backed a tow truck into the house.
Which was so humorous because I actually witnessed that live. And
I didn't find it that funny.
And the humorous thing was not that, but that I actually saw it happening and you weren't aware yet that they were surrounding the property.
The door
right?
open, you mean?
Yeah, I was there when they busted the door. I actually was on the scene before you guys were aware of it, which just blows my mind.
Yeah.
I didn't know that originally, but I found that out like a year or more later.
But the point that I was trying to make there is that they acquired this thing and they made it sound like this was only for officer safety.
Of course.
This was only going to be used in a situation where there was like a mass shooter or something, and they had to bring the police in a safe vehicle because it's got bulletproof, armored shielding or whatever, and quote-unquote officer safety is so paramount for them. So that was what it was portrayed as.
It's amazing to compare the 2016 raid of the studio versus the 2021 raid, because they just knocked on your door in 2016.
2016, they did.
So
yeah,
what was the reason that they needed? What changed between 2016 and 2021? That somehow made you guys a danger. I mean, it's just disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an example of how scared they were of me, I went into the courthouse one time and I had a 357 on my hip, which I thought was permissible up until you got to the metal detector. Apparently it wasn't. Apparently, according to them at the time, it was not legal for me to walk up to the plexiglass window and talk to them with a weapon either. But so they call the police, and I made, I think, a Pork 411 call or something, but a bunch of porks got to the courthouse before the police did. So four cops come charging in with drawn guns.
Oh, wow.
And one of the porks says, yeah, the guy with the gun is Rich Paul. He's in the bathroom, at which point two of the cops put their guns away, turned on their heels, and walked out. The other two put their guns away and went in the bathroom to talk to me. But once they found out it was me, there was absolutely no fear.
Yeah.
So, because they knew who I was, they knew I wasn't going to go crazy and start shooting people up.
I guess the best answer to the question, I'm just going to try to answer as I think they would answer, is like, well, we knew Matt Roach was there and he had guns. That's the best answer,
in the
that's what changed.
In 2021 raid.
That's what changed.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you think that's acceptable?
I mean,
as an excuse, someone they knew had guns, even though he has no criminal past.
The problem is they didn't use it on just this side, on the Free Talk Live side. They used it on the other side of the building, right?
Yeah,
which just doesn't make sense.
He doesn't have a gun.
Right. So
yeah, that's a good point. That busts a hole in it. Plus, again, Roach has guns, but so do a bunch of people in New Hampshire, and they're peaceful gun owners who have never done anything criminal with their weapons.
Right, and there was no reason to think even with that situation, that there would be some sort of, the guy was here's the thing. Matt passed the most severe background check for
oh yeah, that's a good point.
The most dangerous type of weapon.
Yeah, because he's got really fancy weapons, right?
Yeah, he's got suppressors or something. Yeah, and don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure. And
he's talking
whatever's
about
legal.
Yeah, he's talking about
whatever is legal, he had a license for.
But that's a great point. From the federal government.
From the feds.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, there's really no excuse for that. But so we were just talking about this whole Bearcat thing, right? They brought the Bearcat in here, and they used it as an offensive weapon, which is what we knew they were going to do. I mean, the original video for the Bearcat, the promo video from Lenco, the manufacturer, shows them with a battering ram on the front of the thing, right? So, we know what the intention is here. Anyway, that's the same excuse they're using in San Francisco. They're saying here, hey, look, this is officer safety. This is in a circumstance where there could be an officer getting harmed. We just want to be able to have the robot in there instead and want to be able to shoot you to death with the robot. That's fine, right? And that's what they're asking for.
Wow.
Yeah.
As somebody who's actually worked on artificial intelligence, I find that absolutely terrifying because you're lucky if you can manage artificial stupidity.
Yeah,
AI is I'm very skeptical of AI. It's been something that's been in the works for many decades, and it hasn't really gotten. It's very it's not really there.
Well, we're not talking about AI robots yet. They're asking about remotely piloted robots. So there is indeed apparently a human being behind these robots for now.
Yeah.
But if they're going to authorize this for remotely piloted robots, there's no reason why they wouldn't authorize the same thing for more independent robots. There's more coming up here.
Among other things, I've been called frugal. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. Hey, it all adds up, so it makes sense to question every expense now. For instance, can you live without your telephone landline? That bill shows up like clockwork month after month, while you make most of your calls on a smartphone, right? Unless you need what we used to call the phone company for internet access, cut the cord and take a closer look at your credit card bill. What recurring charges can you live without? Apps like Truebill help you track and manage your subscriptions. If you bank with Bank of America, their free Keep the Change feature rounds up your purchases to the next dollar and deposits it into your savings account. It all adds up. How are you coping? Post your inflation hacks at andyoucanquoteme.com.
I'm a little obsessed with My Magic Mud. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, the founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I didn't even know my teeth were coffee stained. A week's worth of use convinced me, and now I use it every 3 or 4 days. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, and I think it cleans better too. My Magic Mud's available at most local health food stores, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, CVS, Walmart's Natural Beauty Aisle, but I can get it for you for 20% off with coupon code FTL20 at mymagicmud.com. FTL20 mymagicmud.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 15th through the 18th for the 7th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out in 2022. For 2023, we're going back to where it all started, the weekend before PorcFest. ForkFest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 15th through the 18th. You can find out more at the unofficial website forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the ForkFest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the ForkFest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 15th through the 18th. forkfest.party. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
There are basically 2 types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open here, and you can join us. Your thoughts on robotic police. I mean, it's hard to imagine that there are people out there that think this is a good idea, right? That think
what could possibly go wrong?
Right. I mean, look, we've seen the movies about robots, Terminator, Chappie, right? I don't know if you guys
RoboCop. Yeah, I was just thinking of that one.
So we've seen the movies. We know what's the potential is, at least from the imagination of the humans, and maybe the reality could be worse than what we've seen in the movies. I don't know, but either way, I don't want to find out I don't want to give robots the opportunity to start killing people.
I think the bigger problem here is the government has not shown itself to be responsible with, or law enforcement to be responsible with the toys they've gotten already.
Yeah, that's true.
So why would you trust them with something even more potentially deadly?
Yeah, that's a great point. And to come back to your question earlier, I think nobody was about, what happens if this robot does kill a person? Then who is held responsible? We did point out that there is a human that's controlling the robot, but I mean, we've seen them saying things like when they've shot somebody to death or whatever, oh, whoops, I thought I was trying to draw my taser. And then they get, oh, well, it's okay. You thought you were going to draw your taser, but you drew your gun. So, well, that's just an honest mistake, that kind of thing. Although I think in the Bart Cop situation,
I thought I was drawing my taser, but instead I activated the robot's recreational nuke.
Yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't be that extreme, but that's kind of like, well, how would we, if the person who was controlling the robot said, oh, whoops, I pressed the kill button instead of the zap button or whatever, and it was a total mistake, or there was some sort of issue with the programming. They pressed the right button, but the programming was messed up. The wireless signal didn't go correctly, and there was an error correction or something, and then the robot strangles somebody to death, right? It sounds like it's going to put even more of a buffer of safety between what happens in the streets and what happens to the operator of the robot.
It's interesting. It's interesting to see how little restraint the police have in at least some situations, or in some cases that we've seen. I think of one where it wasn't Joa so much, but apparently one of his friends at near a hotel. And they just tased him for absolutely no reason.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was really, you have so little restraint that you. Anyway, I'm just yeah. It's like.
Well, they know they have qualified immunity,
right? And it's I maybe could understand it if somebody was behaving in a manner that was, they were on, I don't know, PCB or some sort of, something that would
That's PCP.
PCP. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Clearly, I'm not up on my drugs.
Well, I'm always there to have your back on that issue, my brother.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. But it's these, it's like if they can't even restrain themselves in the least dangerous circumstances, how are you going to get them to restrain themselves in circumstances that might be a little bit dangerous?
Right, and as we've seen, they love using their toys to the maximum extent that they can, and according to the story here at metro.co.uk, San Francisco, their police department, this is the department that is requesting the use of deadly force by their robots. They say that most of the robots listed in their inventory are primarily used for bomb defusing or dealing with hazardous materials. Newer models do have an operational weapon system. The department's QINET IQ Talon can also be modified to hold various weapons. Now, I had to go and look this one up. This is the Foster Miller Talon. It is a remotely operated vehicle, a small tracked military robot, so it has tracks on it, and designed for missions ranging from reconnaissance to combat. So it's like a little tank, basically. It can be modified to hold various weapons, including the weaponized version, by the way, is currently used by the U.S. Army, can equip grenade launchers, machine guns, or even a .50 caliber rifle. I mean, this thing
still don't have recreational nukes?
Not yet. Give them time. The draft policy will face the San Francisco Board of Supervisors at the end of this month on the 29th. A report also revealed recently that California's Oakland Police Department was considering letting shotgun-equipped robots use deadly force. Shortly after the report came out, Oakland PD announced that it decided against adding armed remote vehicles to the department. So there must have been some level of pushback there in Oakland against that proposal, to where for now they're sidelining it.
Funny that there was not in San Francisco, which is they're the leaders of the pack for arresting people for violent crimes and then just putting them back on the street with no bail.
Well, maybe there will be. I mean, this did just come out, I guess, last week was when this proposal came forward. They're going to be ruling on it in another 4 days, so early Monday or Tuesday this coming week. So I don't know. If we hear any updates on it, we'll certainly let you know, but this is definitely something to be concerned with and something that is likely to spread as soon as one city gets away with it. Others are watching. Other police departments out there are salivating, just waiting for the opportunity to be able to put guns in the hands of these robots that they have.
I can just see, or hear the words, they're going to let us drop bombs again, like coming from some officer's mouth. Oh, yeah. Man, what was it? What
kind of bell do you ring to make a robotic dog salivate?
Yeah. I remember there was a bureaucrat with the tanks, and the guy was caught on video, audio. Yeah. What did he say?
He said, we're going to have our own tank. That was, at the time, a city councilor who ended up becoming the mayor. He's currently the mayor. Or no, he was not the current mayor of Keene, but the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we're going to have our own tank. And he whispered it. He thought he was off mic.
Excited.
He was riled up.
Yeah. It was almost like his own personal tank.
Yeah, even though he himself would never be able to. He's not a cop. He's just
it's like you're not even gonna get to. Well, maybe he's got cop buddy friends that are gonna let him use it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happened, and then we'd made a video out of it and everything, and it got out there, and all of the pushback against the Bearcat here in Keene
didn't make a dang difference.
Didn't matter. They still voted for it. There were only 3 city councilors that voted against it, so we got it. And now the taxpayers of Keene have to pay to fuel and to give oil changes to this thing, change out the tires, make sure it's in tip-top shape for whenever the federal government gang wants to come along with their DEA.
And those things aren't going to be cheap to maintain.
No.
I mean, it's already expensive.
Probably thousands of dollars a year.
Expensive enough to maintain the fleet they've already got of just regular, standardized vehicles. But something like that's a military vehicle. It's not designed to be cheap. It's designed to go into Iraq, Afghanistan, places like that. Not towns. Effectively, what the cities are doing is they're paying for the maintenance of military vehicles.
That's right.
And it's under the guise of local protection, but it's really the military who apparently, I didn't know this, but the military apparently can come in and take those back and use them if they want.
It wouldn't surprise me if the military could, but it's definitely authorized for the FBI and the DEA. Any federal law enforcement agency can come in and they can call up Keene Police and say, "Yep, we need the Bearcat." And here's the keys. It's all gassed up and waiting for you.
I mean, even if on paper the military can't, who's going to tell them that?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The number here tonight is 603-283-6160. But again, are there actually people out there who think, yeah, this is a good idea. We need more police robots. We need bigger police robots. We need police robots with guns and bombs on them. That's a great idea. I mean, I understand there's definitely police cheerleaders out there, but is this really what your vision of the future of policing is? Is this the direction you want to go? All you people with the thin blue line out there, is this really what you want to see happening?
Chicks dig giant robots.
A robot in uniform. What do they call them? Badge bunnies, right?
Yeah.
All right, so the number is 603-283-6160. You can, of course, bring up absolutely anything. We got a short update on what's been going on with the Twitter situation. China with 400 million in lockdown. We touched on it last night, but we haven't really gotten deep into what that situation is because it is really bad. Like, it was bad earlier this year, and now it's getting worse with even more people locked down in China. So we can talk about that. Plus, today, of course, is Black Friday, and that means shopping for a lot of people. I have not seen if there are any crazy Black Friday videos. Last year, there weren't. Last year, it was actually a pretty calm year, apparently, out on Black Friday. And initial reports are showing that people are spending more this year, despite inflation. And we can talk about that, too. You can bring up anything you want. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. As we continue here on, I guess you could call it the Black Friday edition of Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Chris Jones. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. It's just the third time he's made a public appearance directly related to Russia's war in Ukraine, having previously visited a hospital for troops and a training ground for conscripts. Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Over food and drink, the president told just over a dozen mothers that he wanted them to know he personally, and the whole leadership of the country, shares their pain, that he understood nothing can replace the loss of a son, and that he wanted to listen to them firsthand to hear their assessments. Neither their replies nor the president's answers were broadcast, but questions have been repeatedly put to the Ministry of Defense and the president by women's organizations within Russia about the activities and fates of their children, as well as the freedom to talk about problems with the mobilization and recruitment process, for which criticism can currently result in prosecution.
The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure destroyed in Russian attacks. During a trip to Kyiv, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer what he called the UK's unwavering support. Sally Patterson has more.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's visit follows a heavy week of Russian strikes, which damaged Ukraine's electricity infrastructure and left millions without heat, power or water. The minister said the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and that he has seen firsthand how Britain's efforts are helping brave citizens to resist and rebuild. Included in the latest support package is funding to help the war-torn nation rebuild schools and shelters, as well as prepare for the winter. The funding will be targeted to areas recently liberated from Russian control in southern Ukraine, such as the port city of Kherson. Almost £3.5 million of funding, Mr. Cleverly says, will also be set aside for the survivors of sexual violence allegedly carried out by the Russian military.
Elsewhere in Europe, French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour of enshrining abortion rights in the French constitution. The legislation will now go to the French upper house, which also needs to vote for the changes in order for the constitution to be modified. And finally, columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her in a department store 27 years ago. William Denzelo reports from New York.
This new law gives victims of sexual assault a 1-year period to sue their alleged abusers, even if the statute of limitations has expired. E. Jean Carroll is suing Donald Trump for defamation and battery. The former president has repeatedly denied the allegations. He says the claims are a hoax, a lie, and that she was not his type. William Denslow, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the gold coin that proves the existence of a 3rd century Roman emperor previously believed to have been fictional. Emperor Sponsian is featured on the face of a trove of ancient coins that were found 3 centuries ago in Transylvania, a distant outpost of the Roman Empire. But the coins were considered forgeries until a series of new tests were recently conducted.
It's not surprising that people had thought them as forgeries because they look distinctly homemade.
Professor Paul Pearson of University College London is part of a team of earth scientists who figured out that Sponsian really existed.
They're definitely not manufactured in Rome where there was a very, very high artistic standard. But we got them under the microscope and then some analytical equipment and did a whole battery of scientific tests. And we basically showed 2 things. First, they're covered in scratches of exactly the type that coins that have been in circulation for an extended period of time have. And then there's dirt, and the dirt is cemented in place by silica, which is a substance that binds soils together. There's actually 200 pages of scientific reports under this, but they show these coins have been buried underground.
He says there is no evidence to suggest Sponsian ever ruled from Rome itself, but was an emperor nonetheless, governing in a Roman outpost just as the empire itself started falling apart. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
To recap our top stories, Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure in Ukrainian cities. French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour to enshrine abortion rights in the French constitution, and columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her 27 years ago. That's the latest feature story news. Chris Jones reporting.
I know I shouldn't, but these muffins are delicious.
And we'll share our favorite recipes later in the hour, but first our guest says don't give in to road rage. Stay calm behind the wheel and coolly plot your road revenge. Danny Preston is a defensive driving instructor who teaches people how to control their temper behind the wheel. Welcome, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
Danny, there's nothing I hate more than getting cut off.
That drives me nuts. I want to scream out my window.
Getting into an argument with a stranger isn't going to accomplish anything but stress you out.
Well, how should you respond instead?
In 1996, some guy gave me the middle finger after I cut him off. I recognized him from TV. That's when I decided to become a defensive driving instructor, developing the skills I needed to eventually be invited on his show as an expert. Now, once you're there, it's just a simple matter of switching out his muffins with the ones you made yourself. How many did you eat?
What? I don't know.
Thank you so much for sharing your tips, Danny.
Danny is not my true name.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open here, and you can join us. We're kicking off the second hour of the show, and you can bring up absolutely anything you want. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you tonight, you've got Ian.
And Chris.
And nobody.
And again, you can take control of the airwaves here. We're going to go back to your phone calls and thoughts, and then coming up, the latest on the Chinese lockdowns, the latest on what's happening over at Twitter, and anything that happens to be on your mind as well. We started the show out with news about San Francisco, where the police department is now requesting authorization for the use of not just force with their robots, but deadly force if necessary. They're going for the gold in San Francisco, and it's a crazy situation. I just wonder, is there anybody out there that thinks this is a good plan?
And you know who they're not going to use it on is the homeless population.
Well, who knows? I mean, why wouldn't they? You're just saying just because they're allowed to live in the streets or whatever?
No. I'm just saying because they're super well protected apparently, which is why you have a lot of problems with, I guess, like feces on the street and all sorts of other stuff.
Let's go to Joe. He's in Maryland. You're on Free Talk Live. Joe, what's on your mind tonight?
Hey, happy belated anniversary, nobody and Chris. Ian, I said happy anniversary to you
What anniversary?
Thanksgiving. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Great. Same to you. Go ahead, sir.
What do you call it? How come they didn't put a flamethrower on the damn robot?
That would be pretty awesome. I mean, flamethrowers do make everything more awesome.
That's right. What if somebody hacks that robot and it goes on a killing spree, killing innocent people, children, pets?
That's a great point.
I could.
Then it will be really indistinguishable from a real cop.
I could definitely see them like using like something like Telnet to control it. Like I could just
Something
see that.
really unencrypted.
Telnet is completely unsecure. It's a
Yeah.
protocol from like I don't even know how far back, probably the 80s or earlier. I
More
can
like
definitely
the
see this.
60s, brother man.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point, Joe, because we were just talking earlier about the excuses that the police could use, like, oh, whoops, I pressed the wrong button, or something went wrong in the transmission from my instructions to what the robot actually did, or there's a bug in the code. And I didn't even think of your point, and that is that, they could just blame this on a hacker. Like, oh, I don't know what happened. The robot just started controlling itself. Maybe it was a hacker.
They'll probably say something like malfunction or something like that.
Rather than admit that somebody had hacked
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
signal.
because they wouldn't want to admit that, so they'll say malfunction.
Yeah, good
the
point.
robot malfunctioned.
It was a deadly malfunction. Joe, anything else you want to share tonight?
Yeah, there's a computer code that was never broken. That was from Paul LaRue's computer.
Who's that?
The guy who they used to say that they thought Tashi Yakamoto was. He was a brilliant criminal and a brilliant mathematician.
Oh,
and they finally caught him, and they still have his computer, and they haven't cracked the code to get in.
Isn't that guy in prison right now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of stuff that hasn't been like cracked, so to speak. I mean, like if things were so easy to crack, I mean, Bitcoin wouldn't work, right? Cryptocurrencies wouldn't work. But
Thanks, Joe, for the call tonight, man. I definitely appreciate you pointing that out. The number is 603-283-6160. And if you want to call in about the whole robot situation, you are welcome to do so. Of course, we've seen a lot of robots being used in China. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the lockdown videos from
definitely.
Shanghai.
The
earlier
drones,
this year.
right?
Right, the drones with the loudspeakers on them. And they use the dogs in China as well.
The robot dogs.
Yeah, the robot dogs to, again, just kind of yell at people or whatever.
Are they getting those from the United States?
I believe it's a Boston Dynamics product. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's who makes the dog product.
Yeah, I mean, I know
Do they make it in
but-
China? Maybe they're getting it from themselves.
Could be.
I mean, they could be doing like some sort of kind of clone too, or just something that is a dog, but not necessarily, the same thing. China likes to clone things, so it might be some sort of imitation.
They've definitely been using these robots in China for the police state. And if you want to get some idea of what these sick, power-sick freaks here in the United States want to do, just look at China, right? They have robots. They have men in these white suits walking around with clubs, like hurting people who are just trying to leave their job. We were talking about this last night with the Apple iPhone facility where they're manufacturing the iPhone. It's a company called Foxconn. The employees have been kept in this facility 24/7 during the lockdowns, and they are sick of it, and they're trying to get out, and they've been trying to escape like en masse. Large numbers of employees are just making a run for it, basically.
Oh, that explains. I didn't
You've
actually
heard about this?
I mean, so I've seen the headlines of this, and that explains the headline of like fleeing. I forget what. I think it's like fleeing COVID, like lockdown or something.
They're fleeing their workplace.
Didn't make the connection that they were locking people in their their factories in order, and they couldn't do that. They have, and a lot of these factories already have like bunk bed style dormitories. For the factory workers.
Yep.
So. Especially Foxconn, I believe.
Now they can't leave, and apparently there's 200,000 people that work at Fox.
Yeah, so it's not even like that. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah,
and they've been attacked. The footage is crazy. Like the white suited men. I don't know what the official term for these goons are, but they're basically the COVID enforcers. They're in China, and they're being used against the Foxconn workers to try to get them to go back to work. to go back into this facility.
Yeah, if you want to see, it's interesting. If you want to see like the progression of like what's coming, all one has to, you can look at China first, but you can definitely, if you want to see like a Western implementation of it, you can actually already see that by looking at like places, especially like the UK, but certain other countries also. India is another good one. And Australia, we've also learned during the COVID crackdown, is another good one as well.
According to the story at the-sun.com, which we just touched on last night, but it's such a big news. I think it's such an important story. I think we should continue. They are now reaching a new peak level of cases. 31,527 cases. That's nothing, right? Like in a country with 1 billion people in it, 31,000 cases. Those aren't deaths.
That's 1/3 of the world's population right there, guys.
You're talking about China. Not quite 1/3.
No,
I'm sorry. 1/8. Sorry, did I say 1/3?
Yeah, I think it just crossed 8 billion, didn't it?
Yeah, it's about 8 billion, and China's about 1 billion, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's a 1/8 of the world's population.
Yeah, it's huge. But only 31,527 cases, a new record high. So proof that the whole zero COVID policy that they have has not worked, right?
Nope.
That's what their policy has been. Oh, well, we found a few cases, so everyone in the city or in this region or whatever needs to lock down and destroy the economy because there's a few thousand people in the entire country. Now they're locking down 400 million productive people because of 31,000 cases. Beijing going into lockdown as part of the zero COVID measures. Schools, restaurants, gyms, beauty salons, and other facilities have closed this week. Their so-called health authority posted a message on Chinese social media's Weibo platform saying, quote, the epidemic control situation is at a critical time in the city. The city spokesbureaucrat added further, quote, we will continually improve the epidemic prevention and control measures to curb the rapid rise as soon as possible. So apparently, locking people in their homes isn't good enough. I mean, what else how are they going to curb this even harder? What are they going to cook up? They already have a digital pass that everybody has to have in order to go into places if they're even allowed outside of their homes.
I mean, the confusing thing to me is, isn't everybody vaccinated in China already? Like, why would this even...
It would surprise me if there were anyone that wasn't. I mean, there may be some underground types that have managed to avoid it.
Yeah,
I'll bet there's some party brass that isn't vaccinated.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But just to give you an idea of those numbers, 31,000 out of 1 billion is 1 out of every 32,256. And that would be equivalent to 9,920 in the United States.
Wow. That's like, what percentage of 1% is that?
It's not even the size of Keene.
Yeah, there's more coming up here in moments. You can join the show. Bring up what you want here on Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. That's Bitcoin.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? you can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. Do you prefer to listen to Free Talk Live on your schedule on demand? You can find the link to our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com, which features the daily digest of our radio show 7 days a week. Just drop our RSS feed into your favorite podcast client or subscribe to us on the large platforms if you prefer, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartMedia, Spotify, and Stitcher. All the links are at feeds.freetalklive.com. If the daily digests aren't enough for you and you really don't want to miss a moment of Free Talk Live, you can always sign up for our AMPS Patreon at amps.freetalklive.com for just $5 a month, and you'll get the full radio show without recorded commercials. Plus, you'll help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. That's amps.freetalklive.com to join AMPS, or feeds.freetalklive.com to get our main podcast, or find us on the major podcast platforms. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. You can bring up whatever is on your mind. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Ian, Chris, and nobody here tonight. Phones are open. We were talking about the Chinese lockdowns, which are back. I mean, they never really went away. It's just they sort of release in their intensity. They let some people back out for some period of time, and then if some more COVID cases pop up, it's back to lockdown. And now, apparently, according to the Western media reports, it's now 400 million people in China that are locked down. There's a particularly interesting Twitter channel called 2022_lockdown, China Lockdown 2022, which has quick clips from people in the streets, various different cities in China, showing exactly how insane this situation is. And if you haven't seen over the last year any of these videos from China, you really ought to. If you want to join the show, though, the number 603-283-6160, and Free Talk Live is brought to you by listeners like Nicole Edge. Nicole is a Free Talk Live supporter via our AMPS program. She has joined for a gold level, which means she's doing twice what we ask. We ask for $5 a month. She's doing 10. So thank you, Nicole, for stepping up over there at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. That is where you can get signed up with your debit card, credit card, your PayPal account. You can help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. And you get some perks like access to the AMP-only podcast, which has the full radio show without recorded commercials. So once again, thank you, Nicole, for that. Again, it's amps.freetalklive.com. You get, if you were to go and look at the China Lockdown 2022 channel on Twitter, you would see pictures of people rushing out of a marketplace where they say that on November 22nd, Zhaoqing's Jade Market was found as quote-unquote positive, and it was closed, and everyone fled in all directions. You see some video from that. You see video from Chongqing also where a large amount of these white-suited men are walking down what appears to be a sort of a large street with these, I don't know what how you describe these guns. They are ejecting this mist. They're like a mist gun, basically. They
like sanitization.
Yeah, they kind of look like a leaf blower.
Yeah,
it's kind of the look of them, but they just keep on puffing out this mist, supposed disinfectant, which God knows what chemical this is, that they're just literally spraying all over the streets. Even though I don't think there's ever been any allegation. I mean, early on, maybe in the whole COVID freak out, people were thinking COVID would like sit somewhere for 3 weeks, right? And then if you just touched it, you'd get infected. But later on, they said that wasn't the case with COVID. Yeah. So why are they doing this?
I mean, it's probably a lot of it's for show. You know, it's to instill fear in people.
It is scary. I know I'd be freaked out if I saw a bunch of white-suited guys walking around just spraying everything and everywhere with this questionable chemical. That's, to me, way scarier than COVID. So that's some of what you'll see if you're on this channel. There's another one here from a couple of days ago, 5 o'clock in the morning in Guangzhou on a street. People were queuing up for 10 hours. Now, it doesn't say what they're in line for, but there's a huge line of people at 5 in the morning waiting for something. I don't know if it's to get a test.
I mean, doesn't that make it just seems like it makes absolutely no sense. If they're going to be, prevented from leaving their houses, and yet then they're being forced to queue in line for what, food or something like that?
It's not clear.
That just seems crazy.
Yeah, and then there's another one here from a few days ago in Kangle Village in Guangzhou. People in the quote-unquote restricted area are still waiting for relocation and are forced to be on the streets day and night. They literally show a ton of people in what looks like an alleyway with bedding and pads on which to sleep. They're just outdoors. A ton of people. Like, again, if this is all about keeping people safe from COVID, you in theory don't want to put a bunch of people together in a small space, but that's exactly what's going on here. So it's just like none of it makes sense.
There was a time factor as well. The longer somebody is near another human being, the increased chance of getting COVID in theory. So if that's the case, that also doesn't make a lot of sense. You'd want to minimize that interaction and then go from there, in theory at least.
So the capital city, which is Beijing, is now on lockdown. It now requires a negative PCR test result within 48 hours for those seeking to enter public places, such as shopping malls, hotels, and government buildings. So it's locked down, but there's still the ability to go shopping as long as you've got the test on your phone that you can show. You've got your quote-unquote COVID health pass or whatever. This is very similar to what they were trying to implement in Europe during the COVID restrictions, and they've got it fully implemented in these Chinese cities. The streets of Chaoyang, the capital's most populous district, are now all but empty. Sanlitun, a high-end shopping area, was nearly silent on Thursday, but for the whirring of the e-bikes of delivery riders ferrying meals for those who are working from home. Several other cities, including Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Chongqing, have tightened COVID restrictions as cases have climbed. Again, there's only 31,000 cases in the entire country, but there are now 412 million people across China that are in some kind of lockdown measures in 49 cities, which is about 30% of the population, according to investment bank Nomura's estimates. 6 million residents of Zhengzhou are also in lockdown after workers at the iPhone factory battled hazmat-suited security personnel. Again, these iPhone workers just want to go home. They're sick of this job. They want to go home, and they're not allowed to. Meanwhile, the northeastern city of Changchun in Jilin province has urged its residents to halt non-essential movement. Hundreds of workers took to the streets around the factory in Zhengzhou, confronting hazmat-clad personnel wielding batons in a rare display of public anger in China. Like, literally, these people are being beaten because they want to leave their jobs.
But at least they're fighting back, which... live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took some time, but in the the earlier, I'm forgetting the city again, but the earlier lockdowns that happened earlier this year, there were some protests that did finally erupt after weeks of people being locked down. So, I mean, we can't expect them to be at the level of us here in New Hampshire, of course.
I have to say, every time I see something like this, it's inspirational to people who want freedom. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter if it's North Korea or it's China or it's the U.S. or, it's Russia. Anywhere people are rising up, I mean, that should be inspirational to everybody, everywhere.
Unfortunately, it didn't inspire enough people in China to actually flip over these lockdowns or whatever. They just
unfortunately
weren't enough.
They have a pretty good system of keeping things under wraps in China, unfortunately. So it is hard.
And the government has guns. The people don't have any guns in China.
That's a fact. The number here is 603-283-6160. So, while most places are back to mostly normal, at least in the Western world, it's insane, total draconian, total lockdown in China right now for 400 million people. If you want to comment, you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160, and you can bring up anything that's on your mind. This is Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Chris Jones. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. It's just the third time he's made a public appearance directly related to Russia's war in Ukraine, having previously visited a hospital for troops and a training ground for conscripts. Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Over food and drink, the president told just over a dozen mothers that he wanted them to know he personally, and the whole leadership of the country, shares their pain, that he understood nothing can replace the loss of a son, and that he wanted to listen to them firsthand to hear their assessments. Neither their replies nor the president's answers were broadcast, but questions have been repeatedly put to the Ministry of Defense and the president by women's organizations within Russia about the activities and fates of their children, as well as the freedom to talk about problems with the mobilization and recruitment process, for which criticism can currently result in prosecution.
The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure destroyed in Russian attacks. During a trip to Kyiv, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer what he called the UK's unwavering support. Sally Patterson has more.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's visit follows a heavy week of Russian strikes, which damaged Ukraine's electricity infrastructure and left millions without heat, power or water. The minister said the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and that he has seen firsthand how Britain's efforts are helping brave citizens to resist and rebuild. Included in the latest support package is funding to help the war-torn nation rebuild schools and shelters, as well as prepare for the winter. The funding will be targeted to areas recently liberated from Russian control in southern Ukraine, such as the port city of Kherson. Almost £3.5 million of funding, Mr. Cleverly says, will also be set aside for the survivors of sexual violence allegedly carried out by the Russian military.
Elsewhere in Europe, French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour of enshrining abortion rights in the French constitution. The legislation will now go to the French upper house, which also needs to vote for the changes years in order for the Constitution to be modified. And finally, columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her in a department store 27 years ago. William Denzelo reports from New York.
This new law gives victims of sexual assault a 1-year period to sue their alleged abusers, even if the statute of limitations has expired. E. Jean Carroll is suing Donald Trump for defamation and battery. The former president has repeatedly denied the allegations. He says the claims are a hoax, a lie, and that she was not his type. William Denzelo, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
Is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. We've been talking about the Chinese lockdowns, which are expanding to over 400 million people in various states of lockdown, some of them forced to live out in the streets, many of them being relocated, presumably to the insane quarantine camps that they have there in China. We reported on them earlier this year, and they certainly haven't gone away. If anything, they've added more of them. And it's really, really crazy what's been happening. If you want to weigh in, though, you're welcome to join the show. The number here is 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Chris.
And nobody.
We're going to go to your phone calls and thoughts, though. You can bring up anything you want. Let's start with David in New Mexico. Go ahead, David.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kicks were fast as lightning. First of all, Ian. No, I can't afford a shack, dude. I got a refrigerator box, and then last year I put on an addition. I got a dishwasher box, so that's what I live in here out in Nuevo Mexico.
Okay, great. What were you calling about tonight?
Yeah. So, I was calling about your AMP, advertise, market, and promote, because there's an opportunity for you, and you should have discussed it with Kiva, Eddie Aragon, because I think that he may be trying you out, auditioning you to see how his listeners like you back in the time slot, because he's going from drive time to the evening stuff. And that leaves that slot open. He's got to fill it with something.
What do you mean he's going to the evening time slot? Why would he move to evenings?
Didn't he tell you Eddie Aragon is going to do a 4-hour program from our time, 7 to 11. He's not doing his drive time program anymore, and that leaves open at least 2 hours. Maybe that's why he's only got you on 2 hours now instead of 3, is because he's testing you out to see if you can have the first 2 hours of your program on Kiva. And Eddie may be hearing this, and Eddie should call in and give us some feedback, and we would like to see.
Well, thank you for inviting the program director and the owner of the radio station to call in to his own station. Yeah, that's Eddie. He's the program director there at Kiva. Thank you for the call tonight, David. I appreciate it. I mean, that'd be great. If he wants to put us on an afternoon drive, that would be fantastic. I know we're on there right now, but that's only a temporary thing because it's the holiday and he took some time off. I've not heard anything about him going to take over nighttime. I don't know why someone would. I don't know why you would want to abandon an afternoon drive shift, which is a much higher listened to, what they call in the business, day part. The two highest listened parts of the day are drive time, right? People driving to work and people driving from work. That's when you want to be on the radio more so than anything else. So why you would want to give up a shift like that and move into the evenings, it doesn't make any sense. But interesting theory. Let's go on with also Sarah in New Mexico. Go ahead, Sarah. You're on Free Talk Live.
Oh, yes. David is a quite interesting caller, and I'm from New Mexico, so I'm glad other people think that I'm very interesting.
I've heard he's single.
Well, the thing is that, but other people find us very interesting, and I think David is really interesting. And so that, I want to bring up remember last year, the River of Lights? We have like 3D lit up Christmas lights, and it must be really pretty good. And then they're doing a lot of safety improvements because that little boy got killed by the red light violator.
by what?
Remember the off-road vehicle? He ran the red light and killed a little boy that was crossing to get to the river.
Yeah. I remember you called about that. Yeah, somebody with an ATV ran over a little kid.
Right. So
was he drunk? Did you find out whether or not the person driving the ATV was drunk?
Well, I don't know.
Or the little kid, for that matter.
So he ran a red light and he was speeding. We don't know that if he was drunk or not, but he was hiding out in Mexico. They had to round him up. They found him down there, and then they had to boot him out of Mexico and get him sentenced over here.
Well, what makes you think that changing street regulations or whatever is going to have any effect on either a potentially drunk or person who's just not paying any attention? Driver.
Well, they're supposed to have crossing guards, or they're supposed to have some kind of a traffic, make people slow down when they're coming through the intersection.
If the guy is going to run over a little kid, why wouldn't he just run over the crossing guard?
Well, they do that here too. You know what I mean? But it's supposed to be more preventative because it's on.
It sounds to me like they're just going to hire more bureaucrats and say that's an improvement.
The problem with all these safety actions, or so-called actions, is that there's diminishing returns for every new thing that you do, and eventually you may actually be causing a hazard. And I think a perfect example of that is there was a study that was done, and the more signs you put up, right? In theory, it's supposed to make us all safer, but it actually makes us more. It actually makes the situation more dangerous. And what they found was removing those signs, those safety signs, actually increased or reduced the number of incidents.
Can you believe that, Sarah?
Well, I don't know about the sign part of it. That might be true, but I do believe that they proved that speeding cameras reduce accidents by 70%.
And who funded that study, Sarah?
I bet you it was the company that makes the cameras.
I
bet you it was.
There
Thanks
you go.
for the call tonight. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Again, we were talking about the insanity going on in China with their zero COVID policy. Where they are trying to get rid of COVID by locking people down and having them do insane things like, forcing them into quarantine camps. And all of this has been going on now for most of the entire last year, and it has not worked. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to do it harder, according to the report that we read earlier. And it's just absolutely insane. The streets of, this is according to a Reuters report, the streets of Chaoyang, the capital's most populous district, are increasingly empty this week. They are finding that, according to Reuters, this zero COVID policy, the signature policy of President Xi Jinping, they've stuck with this even as the rest of the world is just trying to coexist with the virus. Because as we've seen, the virus is not particularly deadly. But government lockdowns are. If they lock you down into an apartment building and they've put up a big metal gate at the front, because this isn't in many cases a voluntary lockdown. This is, you are forced to stay at home. You will be harmed if you try to leave. You will be prevented physically from leaving in many cases. If they put up a big metal grate on the front of your apartment building and you literally cannot leave, what happens when the apartment complex catches on fire?
That actually happened yesterday in one of the Uyghur areas.
Really?
Yeah, and a number of people died.
Oh, my God.
I don't know what number.
Probably a high number because, again, those metal gates are locked. The only way you're getting out is if you can go out the window.
Yeah, I know they were nailing doors shut in apartment complexes.
They were.
Back, this was probably a year or more ago.
They did it earlier this year, and they're doing it now.
I know they've done it. I know I know I've heard of that it was still happening, but I don't really know of any particular incidences.
Shanghai earlier this year, as you know, was crippled with the lockdown, which lasted for, according to Reuters, 2 months. It was more than 2 months. It was closer to 3, if I recall correctly. And they're saying the new record of infections has broken the previous record from April 13th. This time, big outbreaks are numerous and far-flung, with the biggest in the southern city of Guangzhou and southwestern Chongqing, although hundreds of new infections are reported daily in other cities. And they say that more than a fifth of their GDP is currently under lockdown, which is bigger than the entire British economy right now. Analysts from Nomura wrote that Shanghai-style full lockdowns could be avoided, but they might be replaced by more frequent partial lockdowns in a rising number of cities due to surging COVID case numbers. While the official case tallies are low by global standards, China tries to stamp out every infection chain, a tougher challenge as it faces its first winter battling the highly contagious Omicron variant. Is Omicron still a thing? Weren't they talking about that a year ago? Shouldn't they have new variants by now? It's Free Talk Live.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
My name is Angel Rach. I'm a mother of 2 teenage children, and I fought all the way to the Supreme Court for the right to use the medicine that saved my life. I've been permanently disabled for 10 years, with an inoperable brain tumor, wasting syndrome, and several other serious conditions. For 4 years, I was in a wheelchair, in so much pain, I couldn't even hug my kids. The hardest part was looking in their eyes and seeing how much they were suffering because of my medical condition. The medicine that gave me my life back and gave my kids their mom back was cannabis, also known as medical marijuana. With medical marijuana, I can walk, maintain my weight, and I can be a mom. Without it, my doctors believe that I would die. To learn more about medical marijuana, contact Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or on the web at mpp.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. The China zero COVID policy is still in effect, and they don't have zero COVID. In fact, they have a record high number of cases. It has topped the previous record, which was earlier this year in April. And before you think, if you're just tuning in, before you think to yourself, oh, well, it must be really, really high. No, it's like 31,000 cases across the entire population of China, a country with something like 1 billion plus people. So it's hardly anyone, but they're still going ahead and locking down 400 million people. As a result of that, it's Ian, Chris, and nobody here in the studio tonight. We're going to go to your phone calls and thoughts. You can bring up whatever's on your mind. And by the way, I want to remind you that if you're enjoying Nobody, you can get a lot more of him coming up tomorrow night on Beard Talk Live, which will be happening starting at 10:30 Eastern Time. Just go to video.freetalklive.com. You can follow our Odyssey channel there, and you can watch the show live on our live stream, which is at watch.freetalklive.com tomorrow night, 10:30 Eastern Time. Let's go to Cynthia. She's on the line in California. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you. I'm hearing from sources that what's happening in China is actually bank runs. Their economy is in free fall, and people are trying to get their money out of the banks, so they're shutting them in and not letting them move about. So what I've been listening to Paul Preston at the New California 51st State Movement, right? A process of separating from the state of California.
Is this the south? Is that the southeastern area of California that wants to break away, like you said, the red counties?
They apparently have 200,000 people signed up across the state. They're excluding all the highly populated areas.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what happened with that vote? There was supposed to be a vote in one of those counties, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it was. I think it was like the biggest county in America or something. It's a humongous county in California.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be
Wasn't
a vote.
It like the size of Texas? No, I can't even.
No, not Texas.
It was
size,
big.
It's big.
Oh, it was as big as at least one of the states, I think. Yeah.
That I don't know, but what's interesting is that Paul Preston is reporting that when their activists were checking the voter rolls, they realized there were huge discrepancies. And it turns out in the 1990s, California started allowing people to sign up to vote when they went to get the motor vehicle to get their licenses. And a bunch of those are fictitious. And what's been happening is billions upon billions of dollars have been, federal dollars, have been sent to California, sent through a program called EDD, which is related to unemployment, and ending up in China. And apparently last spring, the feds finally went, oh my God, we got to stop this. And that's when China's economy went into a free fall.
How does it end up in China?
Well, California is fairly corrupt.
Yeah.
The Chinese CCP actually controls a lot of politicians.
There's a lot of Chinese that have migrated to California over the years.
Yeah.
Well, look, you heard, by the way, didn't you, that you just got away, the Connect guy?
The who?
That runs 1,000, that is a software associated with 1,000 elections in this last cycle. The judge let him go, gave him his passport, and a 350 gigabyte flash drive that is believed to have information on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of American voters. I mean, the Pentagon actually had a contract with this company. The company turns out to be owned by the CCP. Okay?
Very interesting.
It's registered in China, and it's owned by the CCP. And this man immigrated here, I think, in his teens, became a U.S. citizen and a software expert, and he set up this software that helps to manage elections.
Nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah.
Nothing to see.
It's interesting. So I don't know whether or not this story, I don't know any of the reliability of the story or information you're providing, but I definitely have heard of companies and organizations being set up in other countries by either Russia or China, and certainly the Chinese police stations is kind of, I guess, an example of that. So it's not beyond belief.
No, it's absolutely not beyond belief. Cynthia, anything else you want to share tonight?
Well, I just encourage people to look at the 51st state movement, the New California movement, to see if that wouldn't be valid in their own state.
Where does one go to get information about this? Is there a website for them?
Yes, he does have a website for that. And there is a constitutionally
Do you know what it is?
usable mechanism that was used for West Virginia to separate from Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what the website is?
New California, I think.
New California. Okay. We'll take a look into it. And I really appreciate your call tonight, Cynthia, especially because I had forgotten all about, and thank you for the call, I had forgotten all about that town or city or whatever, that county. San Bernardino, where they did vote. And it did make it into the news. We just hadn't heard about it. According to...
Did it pass?
It did. According to Newsweek, a narrow majority of voters in San Bernardino, California, have voted in favor of a measure allowing county officials to initiate the process of seceding from the state of California.
Wait, there's a process for that?
Of course there's a process,
That's curious. I wonder what that process is.
There's always a process with politics. There's always a bunch of stupid hoops to jump through. The measure asked the electorate whether San Bernardino County elected representatives should, quote, study and advocate for all options to obtain the county's fair share of state funding, including secession from the state of California. So it's not really a secession.
That have to go to the federal level? Because that doesn't. I thought
in order to be admitted as a state. Yes.
Yeah, if they're going to separate from California, I mean, I guess they could do it within California, so it would be like an independent territory of California or something like that, where they,
I don't know,
govern independently.
Yeah.
But I think in order to make it another state or territory of the United States, it'd have to go to the federal level.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the way this is worded, it's not straight up, we're going to secede from California. It's to, quote, study and advocate for all options to obtain the fair share of state funding. So this is just about money, right? Like this isn't about independence. It's just they're throwing secession on the table and saying, we'll use secession if we have to get our fair share.
On the one hand, it's like I kind of get it. Like I still feel like this kind of makes sense, right? Like it's not that different in some respects, I think, than NH exit.
It's quite different. In the case of NH exit, we're actually proposing to leave the entirety of the United States. That's an entirely different situation. NH exit isn't based on we're mad because the federal government isn't giving us enough money.
It is a threat. And
I'm going to finish the statement, though. It's not because we are mad because we're not getting enough money from the federal government.
That's true.
So it's nothing like that. What are you saying? It's a threat. What do you
I'm
mean
just
by
saying
it's a threat?
they're using it as a threat, right? They're using it as some sort of threat.
Who's using what as a threat?
The people who are, calling it secession, I guess.
Are you talking about NH exit or are you talking about
California?
Well, we're not threatening anybody here. I mean, NH exit is specifically a peaceful movement. NH exit.
Well, not a violent threat.
Well, normally if you use the term threat.
You're right. I should have said
like violence.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. There's just no comparison here between the two. They're not similar in any way, shape, or form.
I could see why you're saying that.
At the moment, San Bernardino County has some 2.18 million residents. So there's actually more people living in San Bernardino County than in many U.S. states. This is a humongous county. And according to Jeff Burham, who's a real estate mogul, he says the possibility of seceding was added to the proposition by Jeff Burham. He said the state wasn't doing enough to help the county with its increased population.
I'm so confused. Is it or is it not seceding?
It's not, dude.
Okay.
Did you not hear it? I read
he just said to add the proposal to secede, though.
Right. So
what he's calling seceding is not seceding.
I read you the proposal. It says that they are going to study and advocate for all options to obtain the county's fair share of state funding, including secession. So all the proposal does is it says the people of the county want to consider all options to get their funding from the state.
Okay.
And they're willing to use the term of secession as a potential option to try to negotiate for so-called funding. That's what this is about. The real estate agent said, I would never willfully want to leave the state, but I can tell you this, if you're just going to continue to abuse me and abuse us, sometimes you don't have a choice but to stand up for yourself. He suggested the county be turned into a new state with the name of Empire. Dude, that's already New York. I mean, I guess New York's not named. State. It's not named Empire, but it is called the Empire State. The measure was put to San Bernardino's voters this month, a general election, and was passed with 51.3% to 48.7%. So if you want to comment here on secession at the county level, the number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Again, that's not exactly what they voted on.
No, but neither is NH Exit. It's a vote. It's giving the people the ability to vote on it.
Well, that was the proposal earlier this year.
So.
More coming up here. It's Free Talk Live.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Chris Jones. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. It's just the third time he's made a public appearance directly related to Russia's war in Ukraine, having previously visited a hospital for troops and a training ground for conscripts. Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Over food and drink, the president told just over a dozen mothers that he wanted them to know he personally, and the whole leadership of the country, shares their pain, that he understood nothing can replace the loss of a son, and that he wanted to listen to them firsthand to hear their assessments. Neither their replies nor the president's answers were broadcast, but questions have been repeatedly put to the Ministry of Defense and the president by women's organizations within Russia about the activities and fates of their children, as well as the freedom to talk about problems with the mobilization and recruitment process, for which criticism can currently result in prosecution.
The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure destroyed in Russian attacks. During a trip to Kyiv, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer what he called the UK's unwavering support. Sally Patterson has more.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's visit follows a heavy week of Russian strikes, which damaged Ukraine's electricity infrastructure and left millions without heat, power or water. The minister said the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, and that he has seen firsthand how Britain's efforts are helping brave citizens to resist and rebuild. Included in the latest support package is funding to help the war-torn nation rebuild schools and shelters, as well as prepare for the winter. The funding will be targeted to areas recently liberated from Russian control in southern Ukraine, such as the port city of Kherson. Almost £3.5 million of funding, Mr. Cleverly says, will also be set aside for the survivors of sexual violence allegedly carried out by the Russian military.
Elsewhere in Europe, French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour of enshrining abortion rights in the French constitution. The legislation will now go to the French upper house, which also needs to vote for the changes in order for the constitution to be modified. And finally, columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her in a department store 27 years ago. William Denzelo reports from New York.
This new law gives victims of sexual assault a 1-year period to sue their alleged abusers, even if the statute of limitations has expired. E. Jean Carroll is suing Donald Trump for defamation and battery. The former president has repeatedly denied the allegations. He says the claims are a hoax, a lie, and that she was not his type. William Denzelo, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the gold coin that proves the existence of a 3rd century Roman emperor previously believed to have been fictional. Emperor Sponsian is featured on the face of a trove of ancient coins that were found 3 centuries ago in Transylvania, a distant outpost of the Roman Empire. But the coins were considered forgeries until a series of new tests were recently conducted.
It's not surprising that people had thought them as forgeries because they look distinctly homemade.
Professor Paul Pearson of University College London is part of a team of earth scientists who figured out that Sponsian really existed.
They're definitely not manufactured in Rome where there was a very, very high artistic standard. But we got them under the microscope and then some analytical equipment and did a whole battery of scientific tests. And we basically showed 2 things. First, they're covered in scratches of exactly the type that coins that have been in circulation for an extended period of time have. And then there's dirt, and the dirt is cemented in place by silica, which is a substance that binds soils together. There's actually 200 pages of scientific reports under this, but they show these coins have been buried underground.
He says there is no evidence to suggest Sponsian ever ruled from Rome itself, but was an emperor nonetheless, governing in a Roman outpost just as the empire itself started falling apart. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
To recap our top stories, Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure in Ukrainian cities. French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour to enshrine abortion rights in the French constitution, and columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her 27 years ago. That's the latest feature story news. Chris Jones reporting.
Hollywood's biggest stars are rallying for a good cause this week with the Save Our Children campaign. Celebs like Jessica Simpson, Brad Pitt, and Gwyneth Paltrow headlined a charity event to help their suffering kids who desperately need a chance to live a normal life. Angelina Jolie talked to Starfix about the charity, saying, quote, "You don't have to be a mother to want to help my children, many of whom are not getting a proper education. If you look at the numbers, 1 in 5 of my children will struggle with drug problems." Joining us now is a representative from the charity, Julie Harrison. Julie, it was such a great cause.
Absolutely. We're talking about children who don't have any positive role models. They're born into a life they didn't ask for. And if the state's not going to step up and help these kids, it's time someone did something.
Here's a quote from Victoria Beckham, and I found this powerful. "It breaks my heart to think about these kids living somewhere in my house with no hope for a happy future. Who knows if they even have food to eat?" Julie, according to your group's website, a staggering number of STARS children are being exploited growing up without parents.
Right.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. You can bring up whatever you want to discuss. We've been talking about the latest from San Bernardino, California, where they've been proposing to secede from the state of California. It's Ian, Chris, and Nobody here tonight. Of course, you can join us on the phone, 603-283-6160. We also covered some of the Chinese lockdown news. And by the way, if you want to get more just insane coverage in video to give you some kind of perspective, because obviously we really don't know what it's like unless you're actually there. But there's a bunch of videos that are leaking out where it shows in one video. This is on the Northrop Gundam channel on Twitter. The username there is Gundam Northrop, GUNDAMNORTHROP. Gundam at Gundam Northrop. Earlier today, somebody posts an aerial shot, looks like a drone shot, of what appears to be a newly built COVID quarantine camp just built on an expressway. So it's literally blocks and blocks. Like, you cannot see the end of this in this video footage. You cannot see where it goes off into the haze, into the distance, the smog or whatever. You can't see the end of, I'm counting here, dozens and dozens and dozens of these facilities that are literally built in the middle of an expressway. So try to imagine, they've shut down the expressway to traffic. You cannot drive on this expressway now, and they've literally used it as the flat ground on which to build COVID quarantine camps. That's what's happened.
Crazy.
And like I said, you can see more of this stuff. Check out the Northrop Gundam channel on Twitter. They've got people being shot at, apparently, by the COVID guards now, using live ammunition, allegedly.
At the quarantine camps?
No, not at the quarantine camp. Somewhere else.
Somewhere else, okay.
Probably one of the protest areas would be my guess, but it's hard to really tell what's going on there. But back to the story about San Bernardino. That's where we were just a moment ago. And they voted in favor of a measure that kind of talks about secession. According to the measure that they voted for here with 51.3%, it said, quote, that the elected representatives in San Bernardino County, a county of over 2 million people, by the way, in California, should, quote, study and advocate for all options to obtain the county's fair share of state funding, including secession from the state of California. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they're actually going to secede from California. As the article here at MSN.com points out, they say it's unlikely San Bernardino will secede from California, even though the passing of this measure technically allows elected officials to initiate the project. The measure is mostly symbolic, showing that the county is willing to do whatever it takes to make sure it gets its so-called fair share of state funding, including secession, but it's unclear whether a secession from the state would even be legally or constitutionally possible. According to the Constitution, any secession must be approved by the state legislature and Congress. So why would they let them go? What would the reason be that they would be able to persuade the legislature to let San Bernardino out of the California Union, or whatever you want to call it? Now, of course,
slave owners almost never vote to let their slaves escape.
Right, especially if they're a county that's providing a level of tax dollars to the state coffers that they don't feel like they're getting back, right? So that means that the state is getting a bunch of money out of this.
I wonder if I'm just thinking about this. If the opposite were true, would California let them leave? I wonder.
If the opposite were true, what do you mean?
Where California was sending more money into the county than the county than reverse.
That would be maybe more of a motivation.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know about that.
But then, of course, they probably wouldn't want to leave if that was the case, too.
So even if they could get out of California, then if they want to become the 51st state, they got a whole other problem on their hands because they have to get the approval from Congress to do that. Though there are cases in which previous secession attempts have worked out, Maine seceding from Massachusetts in 1820 and West Virginia being recognized as a new state in 1863, numerous attempts at breaking up California in recent years have all failed. San Bernardino County wasn't the only case where secessionist movements gained a victory in these midterms. 3 counties in Illinois, apparently, Brown, Hardin, and the northeast portion of Madison County, have passed referendums that technically allow initiating the process of secession from Illinois, joining some 24 counties that had already approved of similar non-binding measures. I had not heard about that story. Had you guys heard anything about Illinois?
No.
In Oregon, a majority of residents in Morrow and Wheeler counties also voted in favor of joining Idaho and moving the state line between the two states to create a greater Idaho.
I think I heard about that one.
Yeah, I think that's great news. And now whether or not this means anything from a political standpoint, I think remains to be seen. But it does show that the idea of secession, at the very least, is alive in the United States, and that people aren't afraid to vote in favor of secession as a concept, right? Like these proposals passed in these areas of Illinois and in Oregon, and now technically San Bernardino in California. So the fact that somebody's willing to vote for any kind of provision that uses the word secession, like supposedly we're meant to believe that secession is this dirty word and it's really bad and you're not supposed to use that word, but yet the provisions are passing. Now, I don't know how they were stated in Illinois and Oregon. We don't have the actual wording, but the word secession was used in the San Bernardino ballot measure. So again, will this turn into anything? Probably not, but I think it's a good sign. You're welcome to comment. The number 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. The more that we can get people talking about secession, the closer it becomes to being a reality. Because the more you talk about something, the more you believe in that thing. The more you can get people to believe in that thing. The more they hear about the idea of secession, especially on a local basis.
Yeah, especially if you talk about the benefits of secession, right? As opposed to just the word, right?
Well, yeah, why wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, I feel like
persuade people somehow.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel like sometimes we talk about secession, but we don't really talk about the benefits of it, right? Like, and there's different benefits probably for, the Californian county that left, or the some of these other
Greater Idaho would be leaving
Greater
Oregon.
Idaho, right.
The insane rules of Oregon. They just passed some crazy gun restrictions there.
Yeah, I don't know what the benefits are for those particular regions, but like I can think of benefits for New Hampshire. From like leaving the United States, as an example there.
Well, that's not what these people are proposing, just to be clear, right? They all want to stay in the United States. New Hampshire is the only place that, besides Texas, basically, and there is a California secession movement to actually leave the United States. But New Hampshire's proposal has gone further than any of the rest.
Yeah, so the gun thing might be a good example for them. I think in the case of New Hampshire, maybe that would be also good for New Hampshire from a gun perspective. But
of course it would. We'd get rid of the federal government's gun restrictions.
Right.
I mean, if we got rid of the federal government, you could get your felony annulled in New Hampshire and you could carry a gun again.
Possibly.
So that's one good reason. Another good reason is that New Hampshire is, I believe, what they call a donor state, right? So we're the government. I mean, I would refrain it more like the federal government is taking money. They're stealing more money from us than they're giving back, and I'll put giving back. I'll put that in quotes.
I would say victim state would be a better.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a good way to phrase it. But there's lots of other good reasons, I
think Alu Axelman came up with a list of like 100+ reasons why you should support the idea of New Hampshire independence, and I'm sure many of those apply to other states.
Oh yeah,
just because independence is good for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, the federal government goes into states. And they do violent things to the people of those states.
They sure do.
Even in spite of the fact that many states have laws where something is completely legal, making it completely legal, like maybe weed, for example, or, something
else,
guns, or, whatever. And that's the whole idea of the nullification. But nullification isn't perfect. It doesn't solve all the problems. The only thing that will solve all those problems is independence.
Absolutely right. But the point that you made here is that the feds use violence. That's the number one reason why people are afraid to declare independence, because they're afraid the federal government's going to roll in tanks or drop a nuclear weapon or whatever.
It's easier to use violence against individuals than it is to use it against a whole state, though, I think.
The number here is 603-283-6160, but regardless, that's the irrational fear. I think it's irrational. There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Gold and silver. You can own the most stable assets in recorded history with BullionMax.com. Buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals shipped fully insured directly to your home. Free Talk Live can get you their silver starter kit at employee pricing. Just go to BullionMax.com/FTL. It includes 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products plus a free gold back. This offer is limited to 1 per household, so get yours now. Go to BullionMax.com/FTL.
There are basically 2 types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. We're talking about secession, which appears to be getting more coverage these days. More people, it's an issue for them. They're actually voting on questions of whether or not to leave California, Illinois, and in Oregon. I actually pulled up some more information about what's going on in Oregon. It's actually really interesting, this Greater Idaho proposal, where they're trying to not per se secede, because they're not trying to leave the United States, and they're also not trying to create a 51st state. They're just saying, hey, we'd rather be over here. And why don't we just connect ourselves politically to this other landmass that they think is more like them? And that's the proposal. We'll talk a little bit more about it here. Ian, Chris, and Nobody in joining you tonight. The number 603-283-6160. If you want to weigh in here, maybe you're against the idea of independence. Maybe you think borders should never be shifted.
We should go back to being part of Great Britain.
There are probably people who believe that. There was a guy that came out to the New Hampshire exit proposed where we had the hearing I think all of us went to. And there really was a guy that came out and advocated for that. Now, it was tongue-in-cheek, of course, but the dude actually drove up from, I think, Virginia or something like that. He made a long drive just to come up and give that performance in front of the council or the committee members that were hearing the bill. So what happened in Oregon is really interesting because the news story that we were just sharing was about what was going on in California, where San Bernardino did vote to consider using secession as a negotiating tactic against the California government to try to get more money out of them. Not the most exciting of stories, but still a proposal with the word secession in it did pass in San Bernardino County. But more interestingly is this proposal for the Greater Idaho. This November, 2 counties had voted to join Greater Idaho, but it's 2 additional counties. They already have, looks like, 9 other counties that are all sort of on the eastern or southeastern area of Oregon, these larger counties, right? Like these don't have the big cities in them. Right, this is the sort of the rural area of Oregon, which has absolutely nothing in common with Portland.
I wonder what Idaho has to say about this.
Idaho? Who's Idaho?
Isn't that what we're talking about? Idaho?
I think it's a state.
Yeah, but you said I wonder what Idaho has to say about this. Who are you referring to?
The people of Idaho.
Well, the people of Idaho are voting in large number to leave Idaho. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Who are they joining?
Oh, I'm sorry, Idaho. Oregon. Sorry, yes. The people of Idaho. Great question. I don't know about that.
Okay.
Sorry, I was thinking of Oregon when you said Idaho.
I'm getting confused, and I'm thinking I'm confused.
Oregon,
but
Idaho. Apparently, they're both going to be the same thing here soon if this moves forward. The website is greateridaho.org, by the way. And, you know, as far as proposals to change political designations and such, this one's a pretty straightforward and sensible one, right? Like they're not asking for secession, so they don't have to, get over that hill. That's a pretty big hill. But here's their frequently asked questions page, where they actually give you sort of a pitch on how this actually benefits both Idaho and Oregon, right? So in Oregon, the Portland area is kind of a different place, as I understand it. I've never visited. I've never been there. Have you been to Portland?
I have.
What's it like?
It's a different place.
For sure.
I mean, it's I don't know. It's different. It's obviously, it's a city versus rural. I think that's probably the biggest, most obvious.
Well, yeah, and of course, in most places in the U.S., cities dominate politically in state governments.
You're going to have more conservative values in the more rural areas.
Yeah, and that's what they say here in their frequently asked questions. Why should counties want to become part of Idaho, and why should Oregon counties? It says Oregon will continue to violate more and more American values and American freedoms because northwestern Oregon has 79% of Oregon's population and voters. And Boise, on the other hand, in Idaho, has only 13% of Idaho's population. They say that they'll benefit from so-called law and order. Oregon refuses to protect citizens from criminals, rioters, wildfire arsonists, illegals, and the homeless, but then infringes on your right to defend your family with firearms, which, by the way, just happened. There was a ballot measure in Oregon to, I believe, create some of the most restrictive firearms controls of all of the 50 states. It won by a small margin, but it did win. And of course, it's the people in the city, that voted for that. They say that in low taxes, they'll benefit from that. Idaho is the state with the 8th smallest tax burden, and Oregon ranks 33rd, according to the Tax Foundation. Combining all taxes together, including sales tax, the average Idahoan paid $1,722 less in taxes in 2019 than the average Oregonian. That's averaging together every adult, child, employed, retired, or unemployed. Oregon tax rates continue to go up due to a lack of willingness to control spending. They say safety would benefit, that Idaho allows forests to be managed to prevent destruction of housing from huge wildfires. A thriving economy. Number 5, Idaho has less regulation than any other state. By the way, Idaho was on the list of states for the New Hampshire Free State Project.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
before they called it the New Hampshire Free State Project.
Correct.
They do have no. There's no sales tax in Portland, Oregon.
In the state of Oregon.
In the state, yeah,
the
state.
that's true.
Sorry.
I'm
presuming it's not. It's nowhere else either, too.
But yet their burden is still tremendous as far as taxes is concerned.
Well, I'm just saying there's one good thing about the state.
Idaho has less regulation, they say, than any other state, leading to low unemployment and much lower cost of living. Their approach to regulation and taxation would allow rural industries to revive and employ us again, they say. And finally, number 6, the ruling party in the Oregon legislature only has 2 representatives from a rural district or from eastern or southern Oregon, but our reps would be in the ruling party in Idaho, where our concerns and needs would be heard. And so those are the reasons why they say Oregon County should want to become a part of Idaho. And it seems like those counties agree. And they have voted to do that. In fact, there's another one that's scheduled to vote very soon to join the Greater Idaho movement. But as of right now, they've locked in what appears to be probably 50% of the landmass of Oregon. So, like, this is getting to the point where they actually have what it takes to move this forward. Leaders of the movement, according to OPB, that's the Oregon Public Broadcasting channel at opb.org, say they now have enough support to lobby state legislatures directly to change state lines. According to the story here, Citizens for Greater Idaho has claimed victory as results are now showing both ballot measures garnering strong majorities in Oregon on these 2 counties that voted this year. Only state legislatures and Congress have the power to change state lines, and both ballot questions didn't directly ask voters if they wanted to break away from Oregon and join Idaho. Instead, Morrow County voters supported a measure that will require their Board of Commissioners to meet 3 times a year to discuss, quote, promoting Morrow County's interests regarding relocation of the state border. Unquote. The ballot measure in Wheeler County mandates its county government request state lawmakers to use taxpayer money to explore moving the border. So, not the strongest of wording on the measures themselves, but yet people are talking about this, and this is definitely moving forward. And they've got multiple counties, close to a dozen counties now on board with this, still with a few more that have yet to actually cast their votes. This seems like it's in the realm of the possible. It's Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Chris Jones. Russian President Vladimir Putin has met with mothers of soldiers fighting in Ukraine at his residence near Moscow. It's just the 3rd time he's made a public appearance directly related to Russia's war in Ukraine, having previously visited a hospital for troops and a training ground for conscripts. Stuart Smith reports from Moscow.
Over food and drink, the president told just over a dozen mothers that he wanted them to know he personally, and the whole leadership of the country, shares their pain, that he understood nothing can replace the loss of a son, and that he wanted to listen to them firsthand to hear their assessments. Neither their replies nor the president's answers were broadcast, but questions have been repeatedly put to the Ministry of Defense and the president by women's organizations within Russia about the activities and fates of their children, as well as the freedom to talk about problems with the mobilization and recruitment process, for which criticism can currently result in prosecution.
The UK will send 24 ambulances to Ukraine and a multi-million-pound support package to rebuild infrastructure destroyed in Russian attacks. attacks. During a trip to Kyiv, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer what he called the UK's unwavering support. Sally Patterson has more.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's visit follows a heavy week of Russian strikes, which damaged Ukraine's electricity infrastructure and left millions without heat, power or water. The minister said the UK stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and that he has seen firsthand how Britain's efforts are helping brave citizens to resist and rebuild. Included in the latest support package is funding to help the war-torn nation rebuild schools and shelters, as well as prepare for the winter. The funding will be targeted to areas recently liberated from Russian control in southern Ukraine, such as the port city of Kherson. Almost £3.5 million of funding, Mr. Cleverly says, will also be set aside for the survivors of sexual violence allegedly carried out by the Russian military.
Elsewhere in Europe, French lawmakers have voted overwhelmingly in favour of enshrining abortion rights in the French constitution. The legislation will now go to the French upper house, which also needs to vote for the changes in order for the constitution to be modified. And finally, columnist E. Jean Carroll has filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her in a department store 27 years ago. William Denzelo reports from New York.
This new law gives victims of sexual assault a 1-year period to sue their alleged abusers, even if the statute of limitations has expired. E. Jean Carroll is suing Donald Trump for defamation and battery. The former president has repeatedly denied the allegations. He says the claims are a hoax, a lie, and that she was not his type. William Denzelo, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, we're talking about kind of secession? Can you call this secession what they're talking about with the Greater Idaho thing? The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join the show here tonight. It's Ian.
And Chris.
Nobody was there. We may have lost him temporarily, but I suspect he will return to us. I hear a shuffling. Nobody's remote, by the way. He's been remote for some time. We're hoping to get him back here at some point in the future, maybe by the end of the year or something. Welcome back, sir. Good to have you. He is one of the hosts of Beard Talk Live, which you can hear tomorrow night at 10:30 Eastern Time on watch.freetalklive.com. Or if you can't listen to it live, it is available later on, of course, on our podcast. And Captain Kickass actually asked me to set up a Beard Talk Live page, which I have done at beard.freetalklive.com. You can go there, and it'll be it's got like an RSS feed with just the Beard Talk Live episodes in it, so you can easily find them.
Ooh, it's a real show now.
Yeah, beard.freetalklive.com, so check that out. All right, so 603-283-6160. We're talking about this Greater Idaho movement. Is this secession, guys? Do you think that this proposal of the Idaho counties, quote unquote, leaving and joining Oregon, is that a secessionist movement?
I don't know. I mean, I would think usually secession involves like being independent, but I guess I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would be independent still. It would just be part of another state.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I would say that if you secede from one jurisdiction and join another, that it's two things. The first is a secession.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
The second would be a session or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do essentially. They do have to ask permission, right, to be able to go. They're going to have to pass something in the Idaho legislature. But the interesting thing about this is they might be able to. Like, there's this large chunk of the people of these western, or rather eastern and southern counties in Oregon that are voting for this.
You know, I think the more interesting thing is, like, they can't do it, as I understand it, unless the feds approve, and I don't think the feds are going to approve. So the question then becomes, well, what happens if they do it and both sides agree, like, to it, and it's like, and they just like act as if they're part of another state without.
Do the feds have to approve this one?
Yeah, I believe so.
But well, they're not asking to.
I think
they're not asking to create a new
Texas.
state.
Yeah, but I think even breaking up
just
is
the borders. You think changing
I think
borders?
So. Changing borders, I think, requires.
Well, maybe the story will.
Congress.
We'll get into it here. It does say only state legislatures and Congress have the power to change state lines. And again, they're not to the point where that's actually what they're doing. They're just they're taking the temperature of the people of these counties, and there have been 11 counties now that have passed the Greater Idaho measures in mostly central and eastern Oregon. As a result, there were 2 counties that did not vote for this. So Douglas and Josephine counties voted against the Greater Idaho measures in May. Following the outcomes of that primary, Greater Idaho lopped off Southwest Oregon from its main proposal. So they said, hey, you guys don't want to be a part of our thing? Fine. We're just going to cut out Southwest Oregon. They're focusing now on southern and eastern Oregon as the idea of to make Idaho a larger state.
The idea that anybody should have any choice is somewhat revolutionary.
It seems like it might be a good idea to have more flexible borders, just because political climates change. From time to time, and why should you be stuck to political borders effectively from a couple hundred years ago, or whenever your state was founded?
Well, that's why I say this is a pretty simple proposal that I think could have the legs to go through. It's not unheard of, right? Like the other story that we were reading mentions West Virginia and Maine, of course, seceded into its own state. But there have been border shifts. In fact, one of the stories I was looking at said Washington had a border change in 1958. So
really?
It's not something that is unheard of even in the last 100 years.
Interesting.
Apparently. But they say here in a press release from the group, which is greateridaho.org, quote, the movement has already won elections in 11 of the 15 counties that are proposed to join Idaho, and it says it has enough signatures to get on the ballot in Wallowa County. According to their press release, they said further, the movement says it does not need votes in every county because these election results demonstrate to state legislators that any eastern Oregon county would approve Greater Idaho measures. And so far, it's a huge chunk of the landmass. This story from OPB, that's the Oregon Public Broadcasters, they say, while Greater Idaho celebrated its local victories, it also had an eye on other elections across the state. And they say that a Republican gave the GOP its best chance in years of retaking the governorship. I don't know if she won or not. I don't know if anyone cares. But let's see. What else do we need to know here? McCarter, that's noted the voters had approved the measure meant to prevent legislative walkouts. I think they've turned away from the main thrust of this particular story. So I want to go back to the Greater Idaho website because they make an interesting pitch here on why Idaho would benefit from adding these conservative counties. That seems like a pretty easy pitch, right? Idaho's kind of a conservative state. They're saying, hey, we're like you. They say they would stop Idaho from becoming more liberal. They said we chose a group of counties that voted 70% Republican in 2020. Idaho voted 63.9% Republican. Adding rural counties would prevent Boise from ever drowning out the rest of the state's vote. In the last 8 years, the area has voted against hard drugs and 61% against marijuana legalization. So, again, this isn't a place we would want to spend any time. These are people who are against personal freedoms. These are conservatives.
You know what
right?
we don't have in the United States, at least I don't think so much, is enclaves and enclaves, where you could, because
what is that? What do you mean?
So you can have, like, you could potentially have part of, I don't know, Idaho be, well, what we think of as Idaho, parts of it not be Idaho, it would be part of some other state. So you drive through Idaho and then you
cross into Nevada or something.
Yeah,
like that.
even though Nevada is normally like a different part, right?
Now, is there any actual example of this happening?
I don't know about
in the United States.
I don't know in the United States there is.
Is there any example of it somewhere else?
Yes, all around the world there are enclaves and enclaves. In other countries, like literally other countries, you've got enclaves and enclaves. So,
like, have you seen one of these, or you just know they exist?
They exist. I think like Denmark, maybe, but definitely in Europe. They exist a lot in Europe.
So you're saying within Denmark there is some sort of carve out,
yeah, that's
where
another
country
yes.
exists. But it's a country that already exists somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's not like Andorra, which is its own country
right,
sandwiched
exactly.
in between.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So like there's precedent. Like there are other parts of the world.
There's no precedent.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I might be wrong about that.
That would be a game changer. If somebody could pull that one off, that would be amazing.
It begs the question, why couldn't somebody suggest something along those lines? They could. Right? Because that seems like it would solve a lot of the problems with, Democrat versus Republican in a lot of these, conservative and more liberal states, right? Because you can have if you and you don't even necessarily have to have it like be part of another state. It can also just be like in New Hampshire, there's different regulations for up north than there are down south in some instances. And you could probably do more of that. It's not like you have to dominate, like whoever dominates the state has to dominate the whole state.
Well, I don't know if you remember this this would have been like maybe around the time I moved to New Hampshire, which was 15, 16 years ago. Killington, Vermont was proposing exactly what you're talking about. Killington, Vermont is landlocked. It's in the center of Vermont. Okay, so it's not a border town. But they were actually proposing to join New Hampshire.
Yeah, and that would be an example of an enclave or an enclave.
I don't think it went anywhere. I don't think it ever went to a vote or anything like that. It was making headlines. It was like a ski town.
Yeah.
They felt like they were being taxed too much by Vermont, and they said we should join New Hampshire, and I think it kind of ended there.
I think there's been some discussions with Mass as well, but nothing actually has occurred.
If it could happen, it would be a huge game changer, because then anybody could join New Hampshire as long as they're freedom oriented.
That would be pretty cool.
All right, there's more coming up here in moments. You can join us, and the number is 603-283-6160. But for now, you got to move here if you're a libertarian. More coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You can't win if you don't enter, and you actually can improve your chances of winning a prize drawing if you wrinkle up your entry blank. I'm Holland Cook from survivalspeech.com, and I speak from experience. Why this works: if they'll be spinning the drum before drawing, your entry blank will move around more than, and not adhere to, other perfectly flat entry blanks. And if they don't spin the drum and merely reach into a box full of other perfectly flat entry blanks, many of which are sticking together, yours will feel different to the person reaching in. When you win, act surprised. And if you're looking for work, this is a metaphor. For more tips on sticking out in a world where just too much blends into the blah, 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 hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160, especially if you're involved in the Greater Idaho movement, something that is apparently moving forward in a pretty meaningful fashion. You've got 11 counties in Oregon, which just at a glance here, the different maps that are being displayed on sites like OPB, which is the Oregon Public Broadcasting Channel, they're showing what appears to be a good chunk of the state, at least as far as landmass, according to the website greateridaho.org. The counties that have voted for this, or the counties that in theory should vote for this, would be over 380,000 Oregonians that could leave to quote unquote secede from Oregon and then join Idaho. And I think they should. I mean, they make the argument here that this benefits both sides, right? Like this benefits the leftists in Oregon in that they'll have total domination of the state. They won't have to fight with the conservatives anymore. They can have, all the domination of leftist politics that they want to.
But what about the conservatives in the cities?
They should
I'll
leave.
tell you the thing that I think would be better personally, though, is city-states.
What's that?
Basically, a city-state is of course Athens was a city-state. It's a city that exists independent of any other political authority, or in the context of the United States, it would be basically taking New York City, cutting it out of New York State, and making it a state in its own right. Basically the only people who would be answerable to the people who lived in New York City would be the people who lived in New York City.
Okay, just to clarify, you're not saying make it a state, you're saying make it a nation.
No, I'm saying make it a state, so it would still answer to the federal government, but it would not answer to the state government of New York, and nor would the state government of New York answer to it.
That's a new take on it. But there are some city-states that still exist in the world. I think a couple in Europe, if I'm not mistaken.
The Vatican is a city-state.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What about Andorra? Is that a city-state?
It's a small
country.
Yeah.
What about Liechtenstein?
Yeah, I think that's another one.
Isn't that one of them?
I
Monaco?
don't think
Monaco?
that either.
Yep.
I think that both of those have. I don't think that they're just one big metropolis. I think there are rural areas in both of those jurisdictions, but I could be wrong on
Even
that.
Monaco?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I don't know enough about them. I've not done enough research, although I've heard Liechtenstein is run by a pretty libertarian prince.
Yeah, well, there are times when monarchy can be better than democracy. It's just you better be lucky and you better hope that your libertarian prince doesn't have a illiberal kid or you're in trouble.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, it's on the one hand, it's like democracy may be generally like the better of the options that we generally have in practice in the world, but at the same time, it's like it ain't a great option, right? It's like
I'd take a hands-off king any day over democracy.
Right. It's just one of these things where it's like it's a little bit better maybe, but it depends. Like it's also like probably dependent too. Like there are some really terrible democracies in the world. Like we think of democracy generally as being better, but look at like places like India. I mean, India is really authoritarian.
Or New York City.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, democracy is just two wolves and a sheep deciding on dinner.
Yeah.
Right? So that's all it is.
India's got as much censorship as practically China.
Wow. They go into, again, I'm looking at the reasons why they're saying adding conservative counties from Oregon to Idaho would benefit Idahoans, and they talk about drugs, right? They're saying, these counties voted against marijuana legalization, so if that's valuable to you, then they would want they would want them in Idaho. And they say here, Oregon decriminalized hard drugs in 2020, which will bring addicts closer to Idahoans and tempt Idahoans to make a quick drive to get drugs. Moving the border is the only way to push Oregon's drug laws and abortion law farther from the county in Idaho where you live. It would change the Boise, Oregon drive time.
People are going to be disappointed when they learn that changing the border doesn't change the distance physically between places. Unless they intend to have border guards to institute 3-hour waits and customs searches, it's going to be just as easy to drive across the border.
Well, they're saying here, their point is it would change the drive time to get from Boise to Oregon from 51 minutes to 5 hours. So it would make it harder for Boise residents to go and hop over the border and get drugs
How would
Oregon.
it change the drive time?
Because they would be moving the border west. So if
I see what you're saying.
Right. So what it would do is if this goes through,
they'd be going to a different place.
They wouldn't be able to get drugs in eastern Oregon because it would then be Idaho essentially is their argument. But
yeah, because addicts, if the drive is too long, they'll just stay home and smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
Just ask them.
Yeah, I tend to suspect that it'll just increase the black market, but.
So those are some of the reasons for why they think that they should, be welcomed in Idaho. But here's the other, I guess, the frequently asked questions that they have from greateridaho.org. And this is their pitch on why this would benefit the liberals in Western Oregon. Why should you just let us go, right? Like, hey, we want to go. Why should you just let us? They say you'll save money. In 2019, the average Northwestern Oregonian wage earner subsidized eastern and southern Oregon counties by $382 per year, judging from income tax rates, plus $187 per year for state highways. Are you willing to keep paying that just so Oregon looks big on a map? Oregon's state government is not funded by property tax. The health of the state budget is determined by the average income per person, not the amount of territory. Corporate taxes are a very small part of state revenues. As far as state budget's concerned, people and their incomes matter, not land area. The only thing Oregon has to lose is the satisfaction of seeing a large footprint when they look at the map. Point 2. End the gridlock. In the legislature, without these counties, Republicans in the Oregon legislature would no longer have the numbers to deny quorum by walking out or slow the legislature by forcing bills to be read in full. Because there's not much that the Republicans can do in Oregon, right? It's the Democrats still dominate there, but they would then keep a supermajority if the Republicans left the state, basically, and joined Idaho, which they would need to pass financial laws. Oregon would make progress, becoming more liberal than even Washington state, although not as liberal as New York or California. No Republicans would be added to the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House by this change, and the effect on the Electoral College would only be half an elector out of 538, or less than 0.1%. So that's a pretty strong argument. It's like, hey, we're going to be out of your hair. You guys, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's motivational, I think. Point 3, conservatives of Western Oregon get the opportunity to move to a red state and still live within driving distance of their family in Western Oregon. 4, self-determination. Moving the border allows each side of the state to get the kind of governance that's desired by the majority of its own residents. Oregon would no longer hold Eastern Oregon captive against its will, although I don't know if that really is persuasive to the people in Western Oregon, and Eastern Oregon votes would no longer affect Oregon elections. And number 5, not a loss. The state government owns extremely little land in these counties. It's almost all federal or private land. The state government doesn't collect property taxes. That's interesting. So it has little to lose from the border relocation. Its assets and liabilities would be divided fairly on a per capita basis. So those are the pitch points they have for why the people in Western Oregon should accept this. And I would be really interested to hear from people in Western Oregon who oppose this move. I mean, it seems like this is a win-win for absolutely everybody in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, well, the people who would lose would be the likely conservative residents of the parts that stayed in Oregon.
They should leave then. They should.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And then the other thing you would see is a precipitous drop, I think, of land value in those parts of Oregon, which would allow liberals to spread out and take that land at a bargain price.
Yeah, I think it's a great proposal, and I'm glad to see that so many people are voting for this. Again, 11 counties in Idaho have now voted on some kind of ballot measure that, to some extent or another, enables this. And so they are going to be moving forward, they say, with legislative action on this to put forward some sort of bill to authorize the redrawing of the state borders. Now, again, they also would need to get Idaho's approval on this and then ultimately Congress, but it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Check out Chris. He's got his own show. It's Freedom Decrypted over at freedomdecrypted.com. It's a once-a-week liberty-oriented tech show, and you can join him on Saturdays live at 5 o'clock Eastern at freedomdecrypted.com. We'll see you tomorrow night at freetalklive.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless free market non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300